All right. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Does everything look okay and not a mess? And probably not the audio. My voice is a little bit gone. So just wondering. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. We are going to get started. We're running a little late today. How's the audio out there? Is everything good? Listen to me. Can you hear me okay? You got it? Okay. All right. Everybody hear me okay? Aside from the, voice situation here. So, we've got a lot to talk about today, and this is probably going to break into a few different shows because there's a lot of misinformation as per usual, right? And there's a lot that we need to talk about what the state of Michigan and city of Flint are doing to continue to fail us. Like they're actively failing Flint. And so, thank you, Adam. So once again, thank you for being here. Good morning on this lovely, looks like it's going to be a lovely Michigan fall Saturday afternoon, morning. Yep. I am Melissa Mays. I am a Flint resident. I run What Are You Fighting For? Founded in January of 2015. And I'm operations manager at Flint Rising, as well as a social worker and mental health here in Flint. And so I have been an activist for several years, an advocate for clean water, and we've branched out across the country because we know that this is not only happening to Flint. So with that being said, the goods and the bads are going to spread. We're basically going to export, like we've exported bad water, but also emergency management and all of that to other cities and states. Yeah, we don't want to do that, and right now it's going to be injustice. We would be allowing the responsible parties, the people who made the decisions and who went out of their way to cover up our water being poisoned, we're just letting them go. We're just letting them walk away, no consequences, nothing. I mean, they don't even have to pay their own legal fees because we in Flint and actually the state of Michigan taxpayers have been paying their legal defense fees. So again, explain that to me because they were operating in their official capacity. So we're going to move ahead. We're going to go through, and if we don't finish up in the hour, no problem. We'll continue to do more episodes. I kind of want to tease it. We are going to have a special interview and discussion during the week. It might not be live because I will be in Atlanta helping with the Flint Public Health Youth Academy as they're presenting at the American Public Health Association's National Annual Conference, which is proud of our kids, man. Proud of our kids. I'll tell you what, if our adults can't get this right, our kids are doing it. So I'm a mentor. I'm lucky enough to be a mentor for that. So I may not go live next Saturday, or I might, depending on the kids' presentation schedule and all that. However, we are going to pre-record a special interview talking about the failures of government in Flint, but also what could be done and should be done and what actually happened, because that's another thing that I like to talk about a lot is what's actually happened in Flint, who did the work, who did what, because you see a lot of whitewashing and forgetting the facts, like who did what. And at the end of the day, it's the residents, seriously, the residents that have pushed to make changes in the legislature, that have made changes in, who's elected and made changes for pushing for getting the water switched back to Detroit. It's the residents that sued to get the pipes replaced and to get damages for everybody in Flint who's been impacted by the water crisis. So this has been a resident-led drive. And that's where the successes have been. Now we have allies like the Natural Resource Defense Council, the ACLU of Michigan. If anybody can see my cup, I'm representing right there with my root beer because I'm an adult. The ACLU of Michigan, as well as several other allies that we've had across the years to help us get what we needed. Because left in the hands of the responsible parties, i.e. the city of Flint, state of Michigan, federal government, nothing happens. And in fact, less than nothing happens, as we found out this past week. And so we have to be careful who we elect. We have to be careful of sitting back and take it, even though most of us would like a break. Because like I said, it's been 9.5 years. We're going to be going on 10 years soon, in the Flint water crisis. And we're tired, right? Like people come and go and more power to them. We appreciate people coming and going as long as you're, working with the residents and pushing what the residents are asking for. However, we've had a lot come in and push against us, which has made the fight even more difficult. But also we've had people come in and wipe away all progress and then say, trust us because we're this elected official. Trust us. So rolling right into that. Obviously, the big news this week, one of the many big news things this week was that the criminal charges against 7 state officials, city and state officials, were finally dropped for like the last time, right? And I'm going to be putting some stuff up, and it's going to be a little frustrating, but follow along with me to this. So basically, this is the statement that was put out by the Attorney General's office, the people in charge of prosecuting the responsible parties. And I'm going to point out some things that are infuriating, and then I'll explain why. The Flint Water Prosecution Team responds to Michigan Supreme Court's decision on last remaining Flint Water Crisis charges against Rick Snyder, former Governor Rick Snyder. So it says, this morning, the Michigan Supreme Court declined to hear appeals on a lower court order dismissing the misdemeanor charges brought against the former Governor Rick Snyder. Now, first of all, misdemeanor. And I want to go back to, and I might find the video clip for it. January of 2016 was the first time sort of that Rick Snyder, and I guess the only time besides when Obama came later in 2016, where Rick Snyder sort of faced the public. And this was in January of 2016 at the State of the State address. He brought up the Flint water prosecution, or the Flint water crisis, and said that, and I was there, unfortunately, right up front, and there were thousands of people around the State House. Man, that was so inspiring. People playing trumpets. I was in there with my phone texting out to some friends, telling them when to blow the horn because they couldn't hear what was going on inside, to, especially to call out when it was garbage, right? So I was texting saying, hey, he just said this. Hey, he just said that. But one of the things that former Governor Rick Snyder said was, the buck stops with me. Now, what that means is that, he had acknowledged that he was not only the governor of the state, but effectively the ruler over the city of Flint, because per his own emergency manager law that he pushed through in a lame duck session that voters across the state had voted down, he had taken unilateral control over Flint. So our local elected officials, our mayor at the time, Dane Walling, and our city council had no power, which means they silenced our voices. So the state was in charge, and they switched our water to the Flint River, and then made the decision not to treat it. They also lied to the EPA and lied to the people, as they were having high lead levels spike in 2014, along with E. coli from fecal coliform bacteria and Legionnaires. People were already starting to die from Legionnaires, which is a bacterial pneumonia caused by Legionella bacteria in the water, which feeds off of iron corrosion. So That being said, and the water was not treated properly, we didn't even have the equipment to treat the water, should never been switched. So he said the buck stops with me, which most of us regular folks would take that as he's responsible, so he's going to fix it. Well, in a politician world, that's I'm going to say this and I'm going to do nothing. So we had dealt with, finding out that he had testified in front of Congress in 2017 and had lied, or was it 2016? Goodness, it's blurring. 2016, and he lied to Congress, and there was no consequences because former Congressman, rest in power, sir, Elijah Cummings, had demanded he be pulled back to be, because he'd perjured himself. Basically, he'd lied about when he found out about the Legionnaires outbreaks and people dying, and so this was, common knowledge out there. So basically, with all the FOIAs, the Freedom of Information Act, releases, there had been tens of thousands of emails, papers. You could piece together who did what, when, and where, right? Like, you read through these things and you find out who knew, who made the decision. They made the decision for money, not to save money, but to make money on a privatized pipeline, the Corroded Water Authority. And they wanted us off of Detroit so they could bankrupt Detroit at the same time and take control, of Detroit for about 30 years. And Flint in the same way. We were on our way to bankruptcy as well because the emergency manager appointed by former Governor Rick Snyder had privatized and sold off all of our public assets. So all that great big huge bomb of stuff right there. If you take unilateral control over something and it goes bad, that's on you. If you made the decisions and if you were in charge, because the emergency manager, it wasn't like a normal city manager that reported to like our mayor. The emergency manager reported to the governor's office and the treasurer's office because their job there was to, profit. Anyway, that being said, people died. A lot of people died. And what's sad is that during the initial, started in 2016, criminal investigations led by Todd Flood and his special prosecution team, they found that there were hundreds more people that had died from bacterial pneumonia, which was most likely undiagnosed or misdiagnosed Legionnaires because the state and the county health department, everybody who knew, did not tell doctors or people. So people weren't getting tested for Legionnaires. And because typically Legionnaires happens if you have a commercial air conditioner or if you have, a hot tub. And so, so we had the largest public health outbreak, largest Legionnaires outbreak in history. And 12 people died, /14 people died, /118, /300 some. So yeah, there were hundreds of death certificates that very possibly could have been from Legionnaires. So, crime. People died because of the actions and inactions of the government who is in charge of us, right? So by the state government and county, city, everybody working together to fail Flint. And so what this is, what we're seeing in this statement is that they're saying the Supreme Court put the final nail in the coffin of the Flint water prosecution. So basically, obviously, these prosecutions were dead. This statement, by the way, is infuriating. It could be why I lost my voice because I was yelling and screaming because it says the residents of Flint deserved their day in court. Yes, we did. We did. And the prosecution team, not the Supreme Court, took that away from us. Now, they said their goal was accountability for Flint residents. No, really, because there were 59 charges against 15 people that started in 2016 with Todd Flood appointing an outside, with Bill Schuette, Attorney General Bill Schuette at the time, appointing Todd Flood, who was an outside investigator, special prosecutor. And so he appointed somebody on the outside, which is great because the problem is that the Attorney General's office, one, they're supposed to be protecting the residents of Michigan, right? But also they are defending the governmental employees in the criminal cases, but also in the civil cases. So the same people that are defending these state employees in civil court and criminal court would also be prosecuting them. That makes no sense, right? You can't do that. That's, you know, a conflict. So former Attorney General Bill Schuette had hired Todd Flood, who was outside the Attorney General's office, which makes sense. So they got to work. They started working with residents. I was contacted through my attorney, the proper channels, to help, because the evidence that residents had collected over the years since 2014 was valuable. And so we were involved in, you know, not just testimony, but then evidence, all that stuff. And to where Todd Flood and his team basically lived in Flint to work with residents and to work on these cases. Because even though, like, outside of, you know, of Flint, it's painted as, hey, the city of Flint was broke, so they had to go to the Flint River. No. It's much more complicated with that. They found that there was a fraudulent environmental emergency filed in order to get bonds issued for about $300 million. So Flint could foot the bill to build this unnecessary pipeline that was going to be privatized so wealthy people can get wealthier off of us. Okay, great. So, you know, going through digging, doing all the charges. So basically here we come end of 2018, and there are 59 charges against 15 people. And there's two folks, Nick Lyon and Eden Wells, where they were actually being bound over for trial in 2019 for manslaughter. So that was exciting. But we started hearing rumors in late 2018 that when Attorney General Nessel won, if she won, she was going to fire the entire team. Why? We don't know. So we started reaching out to her, begging her not to do that, because that's resetting almost 3 years of work and hiring and bringing in a whole new team. And we got dodged. And that'll be important as something that you'll see towards the end of my video here today. So we got dodged. She wouldn't come meet with us. She wouldn't talk to us. She wouldn't answer our questions. And then all we were hearing was, well, that's money being spent outside of the Attorney General's office. Well, we don't care about money. Flint residents we care about justice. That should be number one. Right. But they said, oh, it's money. Oh, Todd Flood had, you know, had contributed to former Governor Snyder's first campaign. We don't care. And honestly, I got a little kick out of, you know, Republicans investigating other Republicans. Did not care, because they were moving through looking at the facts. And that's all that mattered to Flint residents, and that somebody was going to be held accountable, and that Flint lives mattered, and that it was not okay to poison people in the name of your job and get away with it and hide behind your position. Right. So then of course the unthinkable happened. And so she won. Attorney General Nessel won, and she fired Todd Flood and his special prosecution team. And there were also RICO cases that were going on. And there was Andy Arena. He used to be head of the FBI office in Detroit, was running those. That all got tossed in the trash. Why? So then Attorney General Nessel hires Fadwa Hamoud as Solicitor General. She was sitting at the time, she was on a board. She was on the board, I think, for Henry Ford Hospital, and had never, and I repeat this, never taken a criminal case to trial. Also had nothing to do with Flint Water Crisis. Same with Kim Worthy. They had nothing to do with the Flint Water Crisis. And they were hired and brought, and they were inside the Attorney General's office. Huge problem. So all of a sudden the charges are, the people are getting fired, and we're like, oh no, until it gets to be the night before a hearing for Eden Wells or Nick Lyon to be bound over for trial, where the judge had agreed that there was enough evidence there to move forward to trial for manslaughter, actual real charges, not the little misdemeanor mess that they, the little parking ticket, $1,000 fine that they were going after Rick Snyder with in this statement. Basically, the night before, all of a sudden we find out from reporters. I found out from a New York Times journalist who reached out to me and said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Well, no, I just got into the office. What's going on?" And he's like, "Did you hear?" I'm like, "Hear what?" And he's like, "Definitely sit down," and told me that all of the charges had been dismissed. All of the cases, even the ones that hadn't been, charged yet, that were in the works, like Darnell Early, who hadn't even had his preliminary hearing yet. Toss in the trash. Oh my God. Right. So, and it was right before we were actually going to see people being held accountable. Right. And at least going to trial and having it open publicly, where you have to admit what you did and admit to the public, to the residents, what happened. Well, Attorney General Nessel did not speak to anybody. She refused to say anything. She said, "Well, I'm going to let Fadwa Hamoud handle this and her team handle this because I'm over here on the civil cases. And again, my question is, how can you be handling the civil cases and defending these same people, these exact same people in the civil cases and the criminal cases, but then you're also prosecuting these same people? How does that work? How is that fair? At least Attorney General Schuette had hired somebody on the outside to deal with the criminal cases. It had nothing to do with the civil cases. So we raised this issue and asked questions. And then 3 weeks after the charges were trashed in June of 2019, there was a town hall. And it was a mess. I was there. It was infuriating. And they refused to tell us anything. There are things that were false. They said that they had found 20,000 documents and it was new, but no, there wasn't. They'd already been gone through. They'd already, been checked. None of them had anything to do with the water crisis. It was like lunch menus and meeting agendas that had nothing to do with us. And they said they found all these devices. That also was not true. Had anybody had been to like any of the hearings and watched any of the hearings, these devices had already been entered into evidence. So I'm sitting there saying, well, that's not true. This isn't true. It's a lie. And then she was emotionally, so Attorney General Nessel did not come to this town hall. She let Fadwa Hamoud and Kim Worthy handle it. They yelled at me. When we got up to ask questions, I asked 2 questions. One, I asked Fadwa Hamoud how many criminal cases she had taken to trial. The answer was none. And then I asked them if they knew what the definition of justice meant to Flint residents. And if they talked to any Flint residents, which they had not talked to anybody who actually lived in Flint and was, suffering through all this. They had not. And so she screamed at me. She said, well, I've been trying to get a hold of you. And I'm like, well, you can't get a hold of me without going through my attorneys. Well, your attorneys won't let me talk to you. Well, some of my attorneys were there and said it wasn't true. So that, that you have that, I guess. You get yelled at by the Solicitor General that's supposed to be, fighting for justice for you. Pardon me. Also, she yelled at Dr. Laura Sullivan, who was one of the lead witnesses, and all these other things. It was just a mess. And it was just basically trying to bash. And the only thing they just kept saying is, we're going to follow the evidence and see where it leads us. And basically that was directly to the trash can. Called it back in 2019 because it was not okay. Like it was a mess and we were being lied to and they were trying to manipulate people's feelings and say, oh, well, Todd Flood did. Basically, they painted it like Todd Flood went out there and he's the one that switched our water, which is not true, right? But it's always been about blaming someone else. So going back to this here statement, blaming the Michigan Supreme Court. Now, the reason that the Michigan Supreme Court had gotten rid of the charges, had said, hey, no, we're dismissing the charges against these people, is because now, I don't know about you, but in my head, the Attorney General and the Attorney General's office are supposed to be the best legal minds in our state, correct? Well, here's something called a one-man grand jury. Now, in the previous, Todd Flood's special criminal investigation team, they used a grand jury, so open, so you could, read what was going on. It wasn't behind closed doors. In Michigan, we have a weirdo law called you can use a one-man grand jury, and it's supposed to be used in cases like if there's gang activity or something to where like the person who is it would be at risk, right? It's to supposedly protect this, and it's used to put Black and brown folk in jail a lot. However, and this is just a fact sheet, took me 2 seconds to pull it up. This says basically it was questions presented about the one-person grand jury. And it's specific to Michigan because why not? We just do things weird. And it talks about why they hold it and they talk about this, that, and whatever. However, there are some restrictions to using a one-man grand jury. So basically they go to a judge that's supposed to not be involved in any of this, present the evidence, and and go from there. However, there's 2 stages. One, you've got to get the indictments saying, yeah, you can move forward to, yes, this is enough evidence to move forward to file charges and take this person to court or whatever to, have arrest warrants, all that great stuff. It's 2 parts. So it says down here, it says a judge. So the second bullet point, it says a judge who serves as the one-man grand jury cannot also preside at a contempt hearing or, and this is where it's important, at a hearing for any other charges airing out of the same one-man grand jury. So basically you can't do both. You can't indict and file charges. Okay, well, that didn't take me long to look this up. And those are the rules of the one-man grand jury. Well, for some reason, the Attorney General's office did that. They went to the one-man grand jury to do both. Okay, well, that's not okay. But also they had issued a warrant and had raided state offices. And when they started collecting evidence, documents, all this stuff that, they didn't get what's called a taint team. Funny name, I know. But what that is you have somebody in there that reviews the documentation and evidence to make sure that there's no violations of constitutional rights, and things like attorney-client privilege. Attorneys should know this. Well, there was attorney-client communications about the Detroit bankruptcy in the evidence that they collected, that the Attorney General's office collected and submitted as evidence. Well, okay, look, I'm not an attorney. I have a lot of them and have sat in a lot of hearings and I've watched a lot of Law and Order and can use Google. But you cannot do that. You cannot violate attorney-client privilege. You cannot submit that as evidence, okay? And they did. They absolutely did. And they violated the rights of the defendants. So, oh my God, they were surprised when, one, they wrongfully used the one-man grand jury. Two, they violated attorney-client privilege. Three, I mean, there's even filings in the wrong county court that Solicitor General Hamoud had filed in the wrong courts. Like, oh my God, like how they threw away, and I mean, again, nothing's perfect. I'm not going to say that, Todd Flood's cases were perfect, but they were solid enough to be bound over for trial. There were actual real charges like manslaughter in there. And they were actually moving forward to financial fraud charges, which is where they hit the nerve for the Carrigandy Water Authority or Genesee County Drain Commissioner Water, the pipeline, the more privatized money pipeline. So sounds like a bad movie or a really crappy version of Law and Order, right? So basically, lawyering 101 or how, there's Google, how to do a criminal case, but it's right here. So this is just this on the screen here is just, somebody who was doing, some comment on Michigan one-person grand juries. Also, the Attorney General Nessel and Solicitor General Fadwa Hamoud and Kim Worthy had talked about how badly the previous special prosecution team had done. However, they went in front of regular grand juries and they went public, and they had public hearings and everything like that. So the judge had agreed that they should move forward. But yet, if they were doing better, they said they were going to do better. The Attorney General Nessel and her Solicitor General said that they were going to do better. Well, you filed in the wrong court. You misused the one-person grand jury. Now, is one-person grand jury a racist thing? It kind of seems like it, and it does, because it's predominantly used for Black and brown folk, especially those who can't afford a good defense, right? A defense attorney team. So, okay, great. So you're going to use this against people who do have a lot of money, our tax money, to defend themselves. Great. Also, what this has done, though, since there's a lot of people who are in jail who might rightfully be there, and others who might not be, that are trying to get their convictions overturned because they were using the one-man grand jury just like this. So there's that then. So infuriating as that is, the other issue that we had was the conflict of interest. Now, at that town hall, if anybody's able to follow all this with me, at that town hall, they had said that in order to keep the defense, so Nessel, in order to keep the Attorney General Nessel, who is defending these state officials in civil court and in the criminal cases, separate from Fadwa Hamoud and her office, it's in the same office, who are prosecuting the criminal cases, that they were going to have what is called an invisible conflict wall. Invisible conflict wall. So that was something. This was adults saying this, just so you know, best legal minds in the state saying, don't worry, we're going to put up an invisible conflict wall. Now, aside from like oxygen and gravity and all that stuff, usually invisible means it doesn't exist, right? Like, nobody's got an invisibility cloak. This isn't Harry Potter. So that was a problem. So what we had brought up was that this is a huge conflict of interest. You cannot say that you're fairly prosecuting these people if you're also defending them. And also there's information that should not be crossing across the civil cases and the criminal cases. There's a whole process there. And they actually went out of their way. Fadwa Hamoud had gone out of her way to make sure that the evidence that was being used in the criminal cases could not be used in the civil cases. Like, why is that your thing? Anyway, so then there's this. This is another kick to the teeth. This is back in 2020, where it was actually brought up that it is a huge conflict of interest. So it says judge, which, my goodness, keeps Nessel on Flint water lawsuits despite conflict complaints. It says Genesee County Circuit Judge Joseph Farah said, despite some causes for concern, disqualifying Dana Nessel was a drastic remedy. So what that is our concern was that it says that the Attorney General Dana Nessel's office we felt that her office should not be able to continue representing both the state government and Flint residents in court, despite allegations that the arrangement created a conflict of interest, right? She's supposed to be, defending the Flint residents, us, and prosecuting the people who did this to us, right? Or who were, accused, people who were responsible. But also, she's defending those same people. How does that work out? Invisible conflict wall or whatever. So anyhow, so basically he said, even though there was causes of concern, he said that to disqualify entirely the AG's office from both cases would seem heavy-handed and an incongruent remedy if based on speculation of confidentiality breaches. Now, we found out later that there were confidentiality breaches, and it doesn't matter because it's past the point of and by the way, for the state of Michigan, the Attorney General's office to say this is the nail in the coffin and people have died in Flint, could you be more tone deaf? People are dead, right? And you call nail in the coffin. Okay, cool, great. But also, through all these actions, you put these cases in the coffin and people. So there you go. So anyhow, the Attorney General's office continues to say it's not our fault. They couldn't have seen this coming. Blah 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 blah. Well, you filed in the wrong courts. You kept yourself in, and an invisible conflict wall didn't prevent conflicts of interest, obviously. And you used the one-man grand jury improperly. And you did not protect attorney-client privilege. How in the world are you surprised that the Michigan Supreme Court, that they're trying to paint as the villains here, that the Michigan Supreme Court threw out your garbage, your garbage cases? Now, as it says drug on, they're like, oh, we're going to appeal, we're going to appeal, we're going to appeal. Well, they're basically, in my opinion, dragging it out to where the statute of limitations is past the point of, surviving these things. So here we are. And that's what's going on in my mind. So again, I always have to say that the opinions expressed in this, in my show are mine, and not necessarily those of the Urban News Station, who allows me to have these this outlet here. Although a lot of folks feel the same way. So basically we had, so basically it says the alleged conflict occurred when Solicitor General Fadwa Hamoud replaced Special Assistant Attorney General Noah Hall, who was one of the original people from Todd Flood's special prosecution team. So Noah Hall with Assistant Attorney Generals working to defend the state from civil lawsuits. Hall's case was initiated on behalf of the people of Michigan against the engineering firms Land and Veolia, which contracted for work leading up to the Flint water switch in 2014. The Assistant Attorney General was placed in a situation where they had to argue simultaneously that the people of Michigan were not harmed by the state and that they were harmed because of the actions and negligence of the engineering firms. So basically, how are you going to sit there and say, hey, the residents of Michigan were not harmed, or the residents of Flint were not harmed, but then they were also harmed? So how does that make sense, right? And again, so, should they have been removed? Yes, I believe absolutely. Maybe not from both cases, but from at least one. You can't prosecute and investigate the same people. Okay. So So when you see the Attorney General and you see people posting about the Michigan Supreme Court, this and that, I want to just remind you that the Attorney General's office knew better and did this to themselves, and in effect did this to us in Flint. So the cases, again, they brought people who had never taken a criminal case to charge to trial and put them in charge. They brought people in that had nothing to do, no knowledge, experience anything with the Flint Water Crisis, and they fired all the people who did. And then they trashed all the cases, went about it a completely different way behind closed doors, did not follow the proper steps to protect attorney-client privilege, to protect the evidence, and to protect the cases in general. So, then we're sitting here, talking about how they violated the defendant's rights. And I don't want to sit here and fight for the, to protect the people that, are responsible for the Flint Water Crisis and our pain and suffering every single day. I feel sick having to do that. But again, we have rights for a reason. So, Adam asks, can this affect other court cases involving Flint? Well, I've talked about this before, but I feel that, so we still have, there's the $600 million that's taken forever to get settled from, the state of Michigan's part, right? But there's still Veolia, the engineering firm, and the EPA / Department of Justice that are still defendants out there that we need them to settle. And let me tell you, it probably will be a lot easier to settle for a much lower number when there's no active criminal investigations, because that kind of lowers the severity. You see what I'm saying? So if people aren't, being held accountable, there's not jail time, this and that, and whatever, I'm sure that they can try to settle for a lot less. So yeah, I do think that this is going to harm us in so many more ways, and there's going to be ripple effects. And also, how does this tell the rest of the world? Like, one, that Flint lives don't matter. Two, that apparently it's okay to poison people if you're working in the government. And if there's no accountability, what's to stop other cities from doing this? Or like what's happening in East Palestine, Ohio? They're getting away with it. The poisoners are getting away with it. And so, again, we have to be leaders here in Flint and fight back and push back and not let them place the blame on someone else. First of all, we're adults, right? We're grown up. So you messed up, acknowledge that and apologize. Because once again, they're nowhere. We don't see them. They have not even faced us. I mean, former Governor Snyder has faced us more than the current Attorney General's office or the Flint Water Special Prosecution Team. We don't even know these people. What does that say? Right? But it's why a lot of utilities, like water departments and stuff, will only hire people who live in the city, because then, you're going to fight harder and do better, and you're less likely to let things slide, right? If you and your family and neighbors, and they're saying that about policing, you should live in the community you're policing, so you understand it better, but also you're less likely to do things that are wrong if you've got to go home to your neighbors that you've just, infringed on their rights. So we don't know most of these people. And we've not had the experience that we had with the special prosecution team, with Todd Flood's team. And we did not have the input or the updates, but also the fact that they were holding these hearings in public. We could see what was going on. We could get the answers on who did this to us, not going behind closed doors and misusing. Again, like I said, it's right here. And this is just, like I said, I Googled it, took 2 seconds, and it's talking about it. And again, you can't do both. A one-man grand jury can't do both. But also, if your cases were so strong, if your cases were better than the previous special prosecution team, why do it behind closed doors? Why? And if and again, going back to that, that June, July nightmare of a town hall that Attorney General Nessel had, to explain why they were tossing out all the charges, there was no good reason. And they had painted it to where the previous prosecution team, the special prosecution team, were just failing every step of the way, even though there were cases that were going to be bound over for trial for manslaughter, actual real charges. So I just want to remind everybody that, no, this is not laying on the shoulders of the Michigan Supreme Court. The rights, first of all, the evidence is tainted. They didn't use a taint team to protect the evidence, so you can't even use it. They violated attorney-client privilege for the people that were defendants, which is frustrating for me and my soul to have to sit here and try to defend the rights of the people who were being prosecuted, the people responsible. what's happened to the rights of Flint residents? What happens to our rights? Where is justice for Flint? But again, when you look at the Attorney General's statement, there's no apology to Flint. There's boo-hoo, the Michigan Supreme Court was mean to us. No, that ain't it. You can't violate the rights of defendants. You cannot violate attorney-client privilege. You filed in the wrong court. You've never taken a criminal case to trial, and that shows. I'm not going to get up here and do that. I'm not going to get up here and be like, hey, I've sat in on a lot of hearings. I know better than this, and I can use Google. I'm sure there's a wiki how on how to not mess it up, but I'm not going to go up there and do this. So why was this person appointed? And let me just say that Solicitor General Fadwa Hammoud not only was appointed, again, let's just remind you that she had not taken a criminal case to trial. And of course, doesn't seem to be changing. That doesn't seem to be changing. But she got promoted. So failing upwards is a thing apparently in the Attorney General's office. So yeah, she got promoted after this massive, epic, embarrassing failure for Flint residents. So in your opinion, one of the questions, what would justice for Flint look like? What could be the alternative scenario? Well, we begged. And again, at this time in 2018 and 2019, I was the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party's Environmental Caucus. And when you're running for office and a caucus asks to speak with you, you need to go present. Now, my whole team, my slate was very progressive and had a lot of questions. One about the rumors we had heard at the time in 2018 about Dana Nessel, if she got into office, she was going to fire Todd Flood, Noah Hall, like in the article, and all of the special prosecution teams for whatever reason and start over from scratch. And also they want to know about Line 5, right? Because, not really good destroying our water, our Great Lakes. So we had questions. She refused to respond to us. She didn't show up. She didn't show up to a meeting with Flint residents either. And that was after she got into office. She sent other people to come talk to us and tell us everything was going to be fine, but they couldn't say anything because it was an ongoing investigation. So we begged. We sent emails, messages. We had people going to Lansing begging her, saying, hey, we heard people begging the governor. We heard, Whitmer, when she got in office, we heard that she was going to come in and clean house and start over. We said, please don't, because we actually had these cases were moving forward. People were flipping, it was like the movies. And, yes, it was moving slowly, but it was moving. And people were going to be bound over trial for manslaughter, meaning our lives meant something. And their actions and inactions caused the death and permanent harm and miscarriages, loss of fertility, our compromised immune systems. Listen to my voice, like I get sick at the, weird wind. But it was going to show that our lives meant something and that justice would come in that aspect. And yeah, for a lot of people, justice meant these people sitting behind bars, certainly not getting promoted like Eden Wells did and getting a 6-figure job, and no one, there was one woman, Corinne Miller, I believe, that got fired. And she was the only one that got fired out of all of the defendants. But then she got to sue, saying she was wrongfully terminated, and got a 6-figure settlement. So, that's definitely not justice. But justice would have been continuing. The Attorney General Nessel coming in, putting Flint first, and working with the existing team, because they had spent about 3 years with us at that time. They knew the case inside and out. They cared about us. They showed up. They basically lived here in Flint, and they were moving things forward, which is a good sign. And they were doing the job. So coming in and blending teams, even working with, learning from, that kind of stuff. But that didn't happen. That did not happen whatsoever. They did not work with them. They did not learn. Like, if somebody's going to retire and somebody else going to take their space, you don't want to bring somebody who's completely not experienced in any of it and say, here you go ahead and run this company. The CEO retired. But don't talk, don't learn anything, and definitely don't read the notes and the case files and all that stuff. And so then it turned into a cat fight, saying, oh, well, Flood didn't give us all the stuff. Well, we didn't read it, and we don't want to read it because it's not our work. Oh, my God, these are people's lives. Flint residents are human beings. We don't care about your pettiness and your political thing. This is not a political issue, damn it. This is a human issue. So these folks who are getting paid with our tax dollars completely blew the case because they didn't know what they were doing, didn't care, in my opinion, messed up every single step of the way, did nothing, like got nothing moving for us and towards justice. No trials, no hearings, no anything out in the public. And why? And here they are still hiding from us because we don't see them. They've not apologized. They're saying, oh, well, we'll release the evidence publicly. Good, I'm sure you will, so we can see how bad things got messed up. But also, so then once all the evidence is out there public, it sure can't be used for anything, right? Like, I'm not an attorney, but if you throw everything out on the table, okay, well, then there's that. So great, so we get to see how you screwed up. Is that what you're doing? You're going to make a book of how to not get justice for Flint residents. Now, in my mind, justice means they get treated like you or I. If we poisoned one person, my backside would be in jail. Poisoned 100,000 people, my backside would be in big time prison. So justice would be they get treated like us if it was us. Name drug through the mud, court, yeah, handcuffs, perp walk, all of the things, right? But again, they're just reiterating that there's different levels of justice here in this country, and rich old white people apparently don't have the same as the rest of us. So that aside, having them face the public and in a public trial, dragging out what all Veolia, land, all of the engineering firms, the EPA, what everybody knew publicly, so we knew, and having them pay for the damages of what they've done. But also, even if prison's only a few years, I think afterwards they should have to move into Flint. They should have to live in a home that has no replaced service line. They have no, they have no filters or anything like that. So that would be justice. Now, I don't know if you can read this, but basically, so DTV, which is student news in Davison, they did an excellent article about no justice for us, right? No justice for us. And they outline, and you can go, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat, the link to this article, because within this article, and by the way, this is student journalism. In this article, there are links. There are links to the charges under former Attorney General Bill Schuette and Todd Flood and Noah Hall and their special prosecution team. And then also there's a link here. And what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to do this. All right. So hopefully this works. But if not, I am going to share it. I'm going to try to share my screen and show you this video clip from when one of the students at DTV News asked Dana Nessel a question. So we're going to have to hopefully this works. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and yeah, we're going to see. Let's see if this works. First time I've tried it. Let's see. Here we go.
The water you drink is toxic. Every aspect of your life will be impacted by whether or not you vote.
That perfectly transitions into the Flint Water Crisis. Do we have any updates on the investigation?
Not at this time, no.
Really? All right. So it's been 10 years. Do you think justice is going to be? All right.
So, yeah, that's one of the youth interviewing and asking current Attorney General Dana Nessel if there's going to be, we're going on 10 years here in Flint Water Crisis, if there's going to be justice for Flint. And the response was to walk away. I mean, honestly, like that couldn't be any more, yeah. So here's the link to that, and it's in the chat as well, to their report, but the link to the video of her walking away from I'm not going to say child, a young person, a young journalist asking questions. And she said, that's why you vote, because living with poison water can impact everything every day. And okay, so that is rolling into where we currently are. And to kind of wrap this up, yes, Flint's water is still contaminated. Yes, we still have, pipes in the ground, and we filed, myself, Concerned Pastors Social Action, Natural Resources Defense Council, and ACLU of Michigan filed again in court today looking to hold the city in violation because they missed yet another deadline to replace the lead and galvanized steel service lines. And the restorations aren't finished. We're not done. And we're trying to nail down give us a date and everything. So we'll see what happens. I'll update you guys about that when we get, news back from the court. The contempt filing is still hanging out there. The judge has to decide if he's going to hold the city administration and the mayor in contempt for not following the judge's orders. But yeah, so also right now, Eagle has not finished the application to renew. Back in August, there was 17 million left of the water infrastructure, the federal water infrastructure funds, the WIN funds, going back to President Obama's term and when he left office in 2016. And there's 17 million left, and the city finally filled out the paperwork, but the state has not. So right now, the state continues to fail us by one. They are also a party to our Safe Drinking Water Act lawsuit. And we have a previous episode with an NRDC attorney. If you want to check that out, Sarah Tallman from the NRDC, explaining that the state can push the city and should and has before. And then also they need to get on the WIN fund application because otherwise it expires December 31st. And why in the world would Flint be walking away from millions of dollars, especially to finish the pipe replacement infrastructure updates and everything? So again, the state's failing us by one. No justice for Flint in the criminal court. What can we do? I'm not sure. If anybody out there is a legal genius, that would be great if you can give us some advice. But we've gotten some hints and stuff what we can do. But the biggest thing is fighting back, continuing not to give up and everything. But then also, we need to push the state to finish the WIN fund application so we can renew those funds. But yeah, don't give up. Continue to push the state and the city because this mayor and the city is failing us quite a bit. And yeah, continue to read in the description what you need to do to get your service line inspected, changed, property restored and everything. And then just keep talking. Keep talking to one another, keep speaking out, keep doing what you're doing with, videos and photos, and stick together. Because again, none of this would be happening, not the failures. The failures are all on these government folk. None of the progress would be happening if it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for the people pushing. And the world is watching. And yes, that's a lot of pressure, but we are amazing. Flint residents are incredible. And we appreciate our allies as well, those who are actually doing the work with us. And that's amazing. So again, I want to tell you all, this is bad news, but also knowing the facts. And yes, it might be upsetting, but knowing the facts and who is actually at fault gives us the information and the power we need to go at those who are responsible instead of they continue to blame everybody else. Grow up. You did this. You failed. Michigan Attorney General's office failed us. City of Flint's failing us right now. And we have pipes in the ground. The state's allowing the city to fail us. The state's allowing the WIN fund, the 17 million or so, to expire. So we push them because our voices mean something. Our voices matter. And so I don't want you to forget that. And we're going to continue to ask and look for solutions and look for ways to hold people accountable, even if it is getting somebody to investigate the investigators. So we'll see. But in the meantime, please keep care of one another. Be looking for a special episode of In Flint coming up to talk about, what's it like to be a government official? What are your responsibilities? What's it like to not fail Flint, basically, and maybe encourage folks to run for office who have the heart, because obviously those who are in charge of us right now, not many of them care about Flint. And we need to change that. We need to change that. So that being said, Flint, you're amazing, and we're going to continue to do the work. Again, I'm Melissa Mays with What Are You Fighting For? And Flint Rising, as well as, thanking Urban News Station for giving me a place to share this information. Please share with residents. Please reach out to one another and stick together, because that's the only way we're going to win. But in the meantime, keep your chins up like we always do, because we're Flint. You can't knock us down for long. And let's continue fighting and continue sticking out for one another. And please take care of yourself. Until next time, maybe next week, we'll see with my travels. But in the meantime, keep in contact, keep up with one another. Okay. But let's keep going. Let's keep fighting, and keep being amazing. And thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.